Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. The Ministry of External Affairs of India has informed the Parliament that the Government of India has lodged a strong protest with Canada after learning that the Indian consulate officials in Vancouver were subjected to audio and video surveillance and had their private communications intercepted. India has deemed these actions to be flagrant violations of the relevant diplomatic and consular conventions. The Ministry of External Affairs has emphasized by citing technicalities that the Canadian government cannot justify the fact that it is indulging in harassment and intimidation. India has raised concerns regarding the fact that our diplomatic and consular personnel are already functioning in an environment of extremism and violence. In fact, India's consular camps have been attacked by Khalistani goons recently. Now, this action of the Canadian government aggravates the situation and is incompatible with the established diplomatic norms and practices. Let's start this conversation. Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev on the telecast from the Ambassador Sachdev, the situation of the Indian diplomats that have been stationed in Canada is turning from bad to worse. We're getting to know that these officials, the staff at the consulates, are being surveilled, their audio is being intercepted, and there is no security being provided by the Canadian law and order agencies in wake of the protests that have taken place in the past at the consular camps that had been set up that led to violence in the region.
With you on this serious issue. There need to have some background briefing on this. The immunities of diplomats and consular agents are governed across the board by Vienna Convention of 1961 for diplomats and 1963 for consular agents. Canada and India are both signatories to these two conventions, and it's incumbent upon them to follow whatever is prescribed. They prescribe in the main privileges and also duties of the receiving side in this regard. Now, diplomats are immune personalities. Whatever they do, nothing can be done to harm them. Consular agents have a lower degree of immunity, but the receiving state is honor bound to protect them and to allow them sufficient freedom to address their job, which is to get in touch with the consular, the personalities or their own nationals in the receiving country. So if an Indian is arrested, a consular access is allowed to him by an agent of the consulate, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Now, what is happening is quite contrary to what Canadian commitment to Vienna Convention of 1963 for consular agents would be. They are not being allowed to do their job properly without being assaulted. Security is lax, as we saw in Brampton Gurudwara in I think a couple of months ago, when Khalistanis, including an off-duty Canadian policeman, attacked them, lead to a diplomatic incident. Now we are further shocked by ready admission by the Canadians that they are being surveilled and their communications are being intercepted, which is quite shocking. And I think our Minister of State for External Affairs, by telling the Parliament, has also mentioned that a strong protest has been lodged in this regard, as a violation of Vienna Convention of 1963. So this is there's a pattern to it, and the pattern seems to be recurring.
Yeah.
And there seems to be certain amount of impunity.
Yes, sir.
About these things being done.
Okay.
Which is
yeah.
Contrary to commitment.
So how do we tackle this situation? What should be India's response? We have been calibrated in and very cautious in making the counter move, but right now the kind of aggression or the lack of it that India is showing against the Canadian government, is this a sagacious, judicious call that has been taken by the government of India, or more should be done? Professor Madhu Nalapat, what do you think of the situation, and particularly the calibrated response of the government of India in this regard till now?
You know, Ambassador Sachdev has given a very scholarly analysis of the Vienna Convention. It has been completely smashed to bits by Canada. So quite frankly, the Vienna Convention has become an irrelevance so far as Canada is concerned. And I think that is a very, very concerning matter in the field of diplomacy, particularly as Canada is a member of the G7. It's a member of several groupings and is supposed to be a good friend of India. So quite frankly, Megha, we can get into a lengthy discussion on the Vienna Convention, but 61 or 63, but the reality is the Canadians have thrown it into a dustbin. That being the case, what should the Indian response be? What have they done this for? They have done this to protect terrorist groups operating in Canada who are getting funds, assistance and help basically to commit terror acts against India. And these are the individuals, frankly, who are being protected by, so that if there is any discussion of these individuals, immediately they're obviously going to be tipped off. Now, this is absurd. I think, frankly, that, I think the time has come for reciprocation. And I think, quite frankly, a time has come to put increased surveillance, whatever surveillance is being done in Canada, on consular officials of the Canada High Commission in India, for simple reason that many of them are, there have been reports that they've been actually grooming people to become Khalistanis. I don't know about that, but certainly they have been establishing contact with elements who are very pro-violence and acts of terror in India, and many of them have been given visas, despite the record of violence and terror. So I think, Megha, the time has come for strict reciprocity, and I think the time has come for audio and video. I want to also just point out, audio communication, what are we talking about? There may be personal family matters. Mm-hmm. There may be a lot of matters that are being dealt with by the High Commission consular staff with other consular staff, quite independent of relations with Canada. And the Canadians are eavesdropping on all of that. They're eavesdropping on personal conversations. A man has a discussion with his wife, or a lady has a discussion with her children, and that's being discussed.
Yeah.
And this is recorded. This, I can tell you, is a violation of decency. Forget about being a violation of the Vienna Convention. As far as Canada is concerned, where India is concerned, that does not exist. But it's a violation of basic norms of decent behavior.
Okay.
And I think
yes,
strict reciprocity is called for.
Surinder Singh Lali, it's interesting to note what has happened in the last 24 hours. The Canadian judiciary has now had to intervene in the matter regarding the security that the law and order agencies in Canada have not been able to provide to the consulates that had set up camps in the temples. We spoke at length about that violent incident that took place that forced the Indian consulates to shut their camps and not even organize other camps that they had scheduled in the next few days and weeks, because the law and order agencies said that, listen, we are not going to be able to protect you, we are not going to be liable for providing you security and safety against the protests, against the radicals and fundamentalists who have time and again made violent attacks on Hindus, on Sikhs, on Gurdwaras and on temples, and then on diplomats as well. And now the judiciary comes, intervenes and says that the consulate camps will have to be provided with ample security, ample police personnel surrounding the premises, whether it is a temple or any other place where the camp is set up. They have pointedly said that the protesters cannot be in the vicinity of the camps that have been set up. So do you think it's shocking that the judiciary has had to intervene in this matter because the law and order agencies refuse to tackle it?
Thank you, Megha. And every bit of diplomatic conventions and norms that Canada has, thrown down the drain is even more shocking. But Megha, I see it slightly differently. Or maybe if I can just park my point, next to what the distinguished two gentlemen before me said. I don't know about the grand jury indictment of Adani, but there seems to be a grand plan to it. And I think the script is written somewhere by the southern big daddy, which is the United States. Because if you look at it, where does the Five Eyes get the intelligence from? The Washington Post leak, the way Pannu has been screaming from treetops, trying to make our diplomats a target, our embassy, and not to mention the latest one this morning where he's issued an open threat against the DGP meet in Bhubaneswar, but the Prime Minister, the Honorable Home Minister, and the NSA Chief were supposed to be there. And now I think Mr. Adani's case is the new addition to the list. So I see this as a large grand plan to sort of corner India. And why do I say that? Because I don't think they have been very happy with the way, we have not chosen to become their ally, which they're quite habitual to, and a strategic partner. And the way we bought our gasoline from Russia and, the entire are non-leaning towards the G7 and towing the American line. So this is simply a strategy, as far as I'm concerned, to put India on the back foot so that it gives, America more room to negotiate. And now that India suddenly becomes so important because of the Indo-Pacific, because if you look at it, all the growing economies or the emerging economies are here. So America now needs to be here. And for that, they need the space here for which they are trying to put India on the back foot. I mean, the American ambassador on two occasions, of which one was, I was also part of the audience in Delhi, where Eric Garcetti said that India needs to decide which side of the fence they are from. They cannot, be on this side or that side. So I don't think the Americans have also kind of minced their words, and they are trying to push India. And my fear is, as much as people are celebrating, is the next the president who's going to take office at 2.0. I mean, today he already issued a tweet saying that he's going to put more duties on Canada and Mexico, the new NAFTA agreement. So I have a feeling that things are going to be tough because that gentleman is extremely transactional, and the Adani case is something in which they are trying to directly, I'm sorry to be saying this, but this is what I feel, they're trying to directly get to the PMO's office, because they're trying to, sort of take a hit at people who are next to the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So this is what I feel, and this is just to conclude, I think this is Cold War 2.0, where the new dynamics are either in the Chinese camp, which is this part of the world, or the American camp, which is the G7.
Okay, Vicky Nanjappa, I would once again like to highlight, and particularly, do you think this to be a very absurd situation where the law and order agencies express that they will not be able to protect the diplomats, they are not going to be able to protect the temple authorities, the devotees that come to the temple, the retirees and the old people who have to be part of the consular camps to get their certificates, and the judiciary has had to intervene. It has then granted injunction telling the law and order agencies that they cannot allow protesters 100 meters from the temple premises where the consular camps are going to be set up. Do you find this absurd that the law and order agencies expressing that they can't do anything about it, and the judiciary has had to intervene in this matter?
Yeah, I mean, I do find it absurd, Megha, but I also don't find it surprising, because, this was bound to happen, because it's kind of, going out of hand, snooping into, what the officials are speaking, and, just brazenly allowing these attacks, and then, planting news in different media outlets, and then getting someone to talk and then going back and denying it, saying that that media report was false, that the authorities never named the Indian Prime Minister or the National Security Advisor. So basically, Canada seems to be doing everything under the sun except the thing it needs to be doing, and that is to take action against these elements who are sitting there, who are counterproductive not only to India but also to Canada. Slowly, you can gradually see the frustration out there. They need to act on that, and I would say, fortunately, there is a judiciary which has acted on it. Otherwise, you can't. I mean, it's really absurd to say that you are there. They have allowed you legally into the country, and then you legally even built a temple, and then there are attacks on it, and then the law enforcement agency says we can't do anything about it. Now that is very, very absurd. You can't have citizens from elsewhere living there legally, and then you can't throw them under the bus for some small political gain of yours, because we all know what kind of trouble Justin Trudeau is in, and he's going to have a lot more trouble with the Americans in the days to come, thanks to the tariffs. So I think he's trying to do everything under the sun to please that very, very small section whom he thinks could take him through either through the remainder of his term, or if he hopes he is going to win, then I think he would need their support. And that's in a nutshell what is happening out there.
Okay, coming back to you, Ambassador Sachdev, do you think if India takes the first step in making an effort to de-escalate the situation, could there be a quid pro quo that could be expected from Canada? I'm going to give two instances, because when there was this not desired aggression that was shown, where the Home Minister of our country was named in this alleged plot to kill Nijjar. There was the Prime Minister's name that was muddied, that was sullied. We even had the NSA, Ajit Doval, and the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar that were not spared by the Canadian ministers or Canadian publications, Canadian media. There has been now a response that has been issued by the Canadian governments, the authorities, that there is no evidence whatsoever in the Prime Minister or the NSA or the Foreign Minister having any hand whatsoever in this assassination. And then you have it that you see that the judiciary is also in its own small way coming out in helping the diplomats set up their consular camps and ensuring, or at least hoping, by putting out these restrictions, that there is not going to be any obstructions, any disturbances that the consulates will have to face at the consular camps. Do you think this perhaps could be looked upon as some sort of a rapprochement, or maybe not as strong a word, rapprochement, but something on those lines happening?
Thank you, Megha. It's a long question. I'll try to be brief and succinct. My own take is that there is a dynamic between politicians in Canada and executive on one side and the rest on the other. And in the part of the dynamic would be India's soft and hard diplomacy, and would be interventions by United States, as some of the erudite members have mentioned. I would also like to mention here that the usual subterfuge of the executive is, we are with the Khalistanis, but we have to obey the court. So go to the court and get an injunction, etc., etc. So there is a dynamic leading to the elections next spring in Canada, and that dynamic is what predicates the politicians to behave in a particular manner on this issue. Now, let international relations or Vienna Convention commitments be done. Till then, we will see it when it comes after the elections, or whoever takes over. Now, here, I think we have the parliamentary questions reply and strong language used is part of shadow boxing which is going on between India and Canada. We are not privy to it, but I'm sure that plenty of things are happening below the surface.
Yeah.
Where the United States might be playing some role, positive or negative. It needs to be, the history would judge it later. But I think there is an attempt to guardrail the development from getting out of hand.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that seemed to be producing some resistance, but at the same time, some sort of limits to the actions being taken. There is limits to counter them, counter the wildest of sort of proclivities that politicians might have had to prove that they outdo each other as pro-Khalistani, but then they are also being subject to some checks and balances by outside forces, including India,
Okay.
including non-Sikh community in Canada,
Yes, sir.
United States, and
Yeah.
also.
Okay. I'll get to quick responses from the rest of my panelists as well. Professor Madhav Nalapat, I just had my cousin fly to Canada. She's picked up a job over there and she's had no problems getting work visas. Do you think, I mean, there is at this point of time normalcy when it comes to in terms of getting visas for Indian nationals to travel to Canada, and then Canadian nationals, perhaps more restrictions for Canadian nationals to come to India?
Well, I don't know about the latter, but Megha, I'm not sure that it was the Canadian government that approached the court. I think it's more likely that the Indian High Commission would have approached the court for justice. So we have to check on that and find out. So I'm not sure the Canadian government led by Trudeau is trying to diffuse the situation. As for the, by basically flat out saying that we uttered a lie and that the NSA, the PM and the EAM were not involved, quite frankly, in my view, I think, some influence was brought to bear that you guys are going too far, because these three people are the architects, frankly, the Prime Minister especially, of a very strong strategic linkage between the United States and India, and some of the United States allies in India. The PM is the strengthened the Quad. The PM signed the foundation agreements with the US. So I think the Canadians were told don't step so totally out of line, and Trudeau himself was forced to recant and mention these three names who are directly involved in this strategic process. So I would like to say, Megha, I think Trudeau is heavily indebted to the Sino-Wahhabi lobby. I think he believes there is a lot of evidence that, true or false, I don't know, that a lot of that has been collected, that a lot of money has been received from elements close to the Chinese state and to certain Wahhabi interests. And Trudeau is pandering to that. Now, whether he's seeking an off-ramp depends on whether it is Trudeau, as should have been the case, who went to court. I mean, I'm frankly, it would be an absurdity. The Prime Minister making a statement and then the Prime Minister's government going to court to challenge, in effect, that very statement. So
right. Okay.
I don't know about that, frankly. But again, I'd like to say strict reciprocity, and from the Indian point of view, justified on ground of security, because some of these individuals may not be up to actions that are in any way unconnected with future attempts at creating terror and violence in India.
Surinder Singh Lali, closing remarks from you, the situation getting tense, it has hit rock bottom. Does it have at this point of time any more space to further deteriorate?
Megha, that would be $1 billion question. If things have to go south, they can really go south. But I think now, with the way Trudeau retracted and Donald Trump, who's not a great fan of Trudeau either, because Donald Trump was on record saying, and if I may quote, he's duplicit and two-faced. So I think there could be a possible change to what this pyromaniac has done. And my last remark would be, I feel really concerned for the Canadian citizens, because look, three legacies that he's leaving. The Chinese have their own police stations and they have Canadian member parliaments on payroll. That's the second biggest economy. With India, we all know what he's taken down to. and Donald Trump ain't a fan of big either. So you have to look at the way, where is he leaving Canada? So a lot of, work would have to be done if the relationship has to be built, because, he's done a great job taking it really, really, really south.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megha.
Coming to you, Vicky, how do we ensure that our consulate staffs, our diplomats are given security? If their phones are being tapped, if they are being video and audio surveilled, if their calls are being intercepted, what should be the step that India should take? Should we recall and withdraw all our diplomats and diplomatic staff from Canada because their safety is paramount?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Megha, because since the law and order is under their control, there's very little we can do, to control the networks and how the telephones work out there. So that is one thing. I think it should be a stronger protest. Just pull out diplomats, like how we deal with Pakistan on a very regular basis. When our diplomats are under threat, I think we need to deal with Canada in a very similar way. I don't think we should have a different approach towards Canada and a different approach towards Pakistan, because I would see that link, because whoever these pro-Khalistan elements are, they're definitely being backed by the ISI. It's a long-term plan of theirs. So I think we need to met out the similar treatment to them and continue to shame them in the international community.
Okay, all right. I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views on this very important subject. Now, the Prime Minister's office has